it's Jeff at Ayala Tours, and since 1986, we've been connecting people to Israel and the Jewish world. We are the official travel partner for Hadassah missions to Israel. We work with outstanding scholars, such as Dr. David Mendelsohn, on trips all over the world. We run Jewish singles tours. We, of course, run these virtual programs. And tonight, I am very excited to learn a bit more from Dr. Mendelsohn about the Jewish experience in India. For those of you that don't know, Dr. Mendelsohn will be leading a group for us to India this November. So if what you hear tonight leaves you intrigued, interested, wanting to learn and experience more for yourself, hopefully you can find out more information about that on our website, ayala.com. In the meantime, here you are. This is a Zoom webinar. We are live. If you happen to be watching this on March 5th, we're live, which means we would like you to be a part of the program. Of course, there's a formal presentation, but afterwards, if you would like to participate by posting questions, you may do so. Post your questions in the Zoom Q&A window, and we will get to as many of those as we can after the formal presentation. This is a recorded session, so if you would like to share this with others or just watch it again and again, just let us know and we can get you a copy or a link to it after the program. Okay, so with that, by way of introduction, with no further ado, for this evening's presentation, I will turn it over to Dr. David Mendelsohn.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for the introduction. And I do hope that I will interest many of you in joining me on this adventure in India, because there's nothing quite like it. And I'm hoping as I take you through some of the experiences that make up both India and the Jews of India, that you will start to get a sense of why it's so particularly fascinating and important for us to take a closer and deeper look into this unique aspect and development of Judaism that developed in a country for thousands of years, and yet, unlike the Jewish experience in so many other places, underwent almost no anti-Semitism, other than a short episode when the Portuguese Inquisition managed to reach Goa, but that's a different story. So I would like to start by sharing my presentation with you. Most of the photos, I would say about 90% of them I took myself, or friends took for me while I was there with them. And one moment, where is my share? Here it is. So I guess I'll start by just saying that Judaism was one of the first foreign religions actually to ever arrive in the Indian subcontinent. And so not only was it the first religion, it was also a monotheistic religion, which was very unique in India, which was, as we know, worshipped many gods and used the intermediary of idols, which as those of us that come from monotheistic religion, it almost sounds like an antiquated idea. We say, "Thou shalt not, worship graven images." The idea of idol worship is almost quaint for us. When we're admonished not to worship idols, we're like, so yeah. So India is basically going to hit all of our senses as a place where there are many idols, there are many religions, all of them created in India. So you have, initially you have Hinduism, you have Jainism, you have Sikhism, Buddhism. And then, of course, later on, you have the influx of Judaism, the first one, and then Islam. But India is going to hit all of our senses, those of us that come with me. And it leaves most people reeling at first. You have colors, smells, flavors, gods, so many of them. And so for any curious person, you can understand why India. On the other hand, you can also say it's overwhelming. Maybe why not India? And we're lucky as Jewish people that we can plug in to our fellow members of our tribe who have undergone centuries, millennia of living among them, adopted to their ways, and yet underwent acculturation, not assimilation. They maintained their Jewishness and yet became fully Indian in the process. And this is, and because of this, in many ways, we have the unique chance to make India our own. This has been my experience, and I visit there yearly as much as I can. And every time I go, I just realize what an incredible gift this is. So when I live in Israel, I'm speaking to you right now at 2:38 in the morning from Jerusalem. I'm often surprised by the number of Israelis that travel to India on a regular basis, usually post-army, but throughout their lives. They're exploring, they're hiking. There's a well-known trail called the Hummus Trail all throughout India. They do Vipassana courses, meditative Buddhist retreats, and so on. And I guess maybe an obvious answer is that after the army, we Israelis are looking for a conflict-free place to explore. But along with my own interest in India, scholarly and otherwise, I would also wonder, almost critically, why Jewish people were immersing themselves in spiritual and mystical studies so far abroad, when in our own scriptures, in our own Torah, in our own Kabbalah and Zohar, we have so many mystical and soul-searching answers and explorations that we can undergo on our own. And I used to wonder, why go there? And recently, I actually began to flip the question. And I realized that there's something in India that can converse with us on that level, and give us other questions, other responses that we're not particularly that we can respond to, and it creates a thoughtful and useful conversation. So I've that flip in my brain really helped me. And this is a picture I just shot out of my car window one day, and I realized that India is the Jewish people. We tend to settle by the coasts, like by the coast of Mumbai, by Cochin, and yet we can't forget. Look, here's a camel, another camel drawing a cart next to a bus, a small bus next to a gas station, and you have this idea of the Silk Road, of this trade with the exotic spices of India, and you have modernity, of course, and all this is still India in a nutshell. This book here, by called Olympus, which is an Indian retelling of Greek myths, I found particularly interesting. It's by Devdut Patanaik, because it was a gift from a friend of mine, an Indian Jewish friend, and I found it a good humbling point. Imagine you have people in India that grow up intelligent, reflective, and with their own mythology, their own stories of Hindu and Buddhist, and all their mythologies and stories of their gods and creation stories, and they're curious about the West, and they're retelling these Greek myths in a way that's relatable to them. We're used to retelling other people's stories in a way that's relatable to us, and I found that also a unique perspective. When you go to India, you will find that you are being examined by interested people as much as you are examining them, and that can also be a bit disconcerting and also fascinating. So here's just a brief map of what we're going to be looking at. Of course, you have India, and since we're investigating the Jews, I wanted you to look at the Bnei Israel Jews, the ones that are located near Mumbai. We're going to look at the Cochin Jews, look all the way down to the south, the very first Jews to ever arrive in India, the so-called Black Jews, and the Baghdadi Jews, those that came later on in the 1700s and became a powerful force whose name, the Sassoon name of Baghdad, they're the Rothschilds of India. They still echo, and they've recreated India in a different kind of image. So, and then of course there's Pakistan, and let's not forget that India and Pakistan were related, and there's many synagogues, and there are Jews of Pakistan that are not a little less known, but still related to the same communities that we're discussing. I wanted to put that out there. So each of these groups that we're speaking about, the Bnei Israel, the Cochin, and the Baghdadi Jews, they developed their own traditions and customs, but within the framework of the same Judaic laws that we all share. And they all became uniquely Indian as well. So this is a little bit as to why India. And now let me ask another very seemingly simple question. Why so colorful? why is India so colorful? I've gone every year, and I've gone through being dazzled, finding it sometimes gaudy, very judgmental of me, finding it beautiful and exhilarating and enjoyable because of the colors, which is also perhaps simplistic of me. So even the statements, this is not to my taste or I like it, the truth is much more interesting and complicated. It's not only the clothing and the buildings, it's the animals are painted, the trucks, everywhere you look. But these colors actually represent a code, and it's a code that's a language. And it's an intrinsic part of Indian consciousness. And this includes the Jews of India. So the deep orange that you see was beloved by the gods of Vishnu, Ganesh, and the goddess Lakshmi. And these bright orange color means that it's the divine aura that will bring peace into your home. So the Jews wear the orange but they see it as one God, Elohim, bringing peace into your home, into your home. The wearing of white actually is seen as the absence of color, and it's the only color that widows are allowed to wear. So red is the color of joy, of passion, of celebration. So when someone goes into mourning, they wear white, and when they get married, they wear bright red and bright colors. And as I said, this has also become part of the Jewish culture as well, and the Muslim. So the green colors that you see everywhere, it's called hara in Hindi. It represents life, happiness, and prosperity. And of course, with nature, green represents nature in many cultures. The blue, which is called nila, you'll often see paintings, Indian paintings, where the gods are represented in blue. So it's the color of divinity, and it represents gods and goddesses. And the color pila, which is yellow, it's associated with intelligence, intellectual aspirations. It's learning, intellect. And you'll see that everywhere where people are trying to engage that aspect of humanity. And gold is considered to be the same, it's called sona. It's considered to be the same as yellow, this idea of engaging your intellectual senses. And these colors are used in clothing, during festivals, religious ceremonies, cultural events. And this use of colors in India is incredibly relevant. And I want you, when you're with me, to start seeing this conversation happening. It's among the colors. So it takes an adjustment. But when you start to see these, look, here's a truck. I wanted to show you painted like this. So when you see these swirls and flashes of brightness, and you understand them as interacting prayers, hopes, and wishes, carrying on their own types of conversation with people, with each other, and with the gods, it's something much more meaningful than just gaudy or delightful. I just showed you here quickly this apotropaic image of it's called the Nazar Batu. It's the sharp-toothed demon that's meant to frighten off evil. It's like the Hamsa in the Middle East or in Israel as well. And I took this picture of this street cleaner because I was naively, the first few times I went to India, I was interested that everybody dressed so colorfully, and I said, oh, they take such pride in their appearance. Isn't that beautiful? And then once you understand the color code and the language and what it's actually saying, you realize that they also are taking part. These are hopes. These are prayers. This is saying something much more than just merely dressing nicely. It's a conversation with the cosmos. It's a conversation with the gods. It's a conversation with other humans. That goes beyond just these are beautiful colors. And of course, wherever you'll go with me, I love people taking selfies. I find the humans have always wanted to show that we're here, and the selfie is the ultimate expression of that. So you won't find me being critical ever of people doing this. And into this colorful soup that we're discussing, this very colorful stew, arrived the Jews. And as I said before, they've lived in India for thousands of years. They've become part of the culture. They learned the language, the customs, and yet they remained Jewish. What does that mean? And as this lecture goes on tonight, I'm going to talk to you about the Indian Jewish cuisine, so that every food also has its individual color, its individual flavor, and these flavors and spices also carry a more intense connotation that would seemingly meet the eye or our taste buds. And so let's leave that for a second, put that in your pocket. And let's look at the question one more time. We're going to revisit the question of idolatry over and over again today. because Daniel Sperber, a Hindu scholar and one of the best known, I guess, rabbis in Israel, has a thesis that he's actually believes that he claims that Hinduism is not, and Jainism and many of these religions that celebrate many gods are not even idolatry. He believes there's one great overarching God, the Great Spirit. And if you read these texts, he actually has, I understand where he's coming from. And all the other gods and goddesses that we see are actually just aspects of the one great divinity. Kind of like in Judaism, some people say the Shekhinah is the feminine aspect of God. We don't say it's a different god or a goddess, we say it's another aspect. And this is where people like Rabbi Sperber are going with this. And yet in India, along with this thesis, it makes me want to go back in time and say, is that what idolatry always was? Was there always a sense of one great God and other aspects? And the more I study, and this is kind of my field, the more I'm finding there's some kind of truth to this as well. But just remember, having said that in India, the Jews have grown up with cultures and religions that celebrate and believe in idols, and believe in praying and going to them and worshiping them as intermediaries, that will intercede for them on behalf of the gods. And perhaps even more triggering as Jews is this apparent worship of the cow, Egel Zahav, like the golden calf. But here again, in India, it's not perceived as worship at all of the cow. It's perceived as honoring. The Hindus never worship. I've never been a Hindu that worshiped the cow. Look at her bowing, putting flowers on its head. If that doesn't look like worshiping, I don't know what does. And yet, everyone I've spoken with tells me that they're respecting and honoring the cow as a living creature, a fellow living creature who gives more than she takes. She eats grass, and in return, she gives milk in abundance. So Hindus do regard all living creatures as sacred, mammals, fishes, birds, etc. And they acknowledge this reverence for life, but they say they don't worship it, but that they worship the idea of it, and they worship the deity for allowing this to be. So, yeah, I wanted to pass that on to you, and also touch on the fact on what I mentioned to you before. How is it that Jews survived for all of these centuries in India almost without ever suffering anti-Semitism? And one theory that I've heard before, here we have a diorama at the Gandhi Museum. I took this picture too of Gandhi with the teaching his fellow Indians that not to basically to no longer look down on the untouchables as a different caste and to treat them as equal human beings. And so this whole caste system that has always bedeviled India forever is also perhaps is one of the reasons why Jews were able to thrive there. Jews were just seen as another caste who did not want to intermarry, wanted to be left to their own devices, and were left as their own caste unto themselves. And this may be the reasons why they were able to actually, oddly enough, this seemingly negative aspect is what may have in many ways protected us for all these years. So let's look at the Jewish communities we're going to be examining today. We're going to be looking at 3 Indian Jewish communities. We're going to start with the Cochin Jews, look at the bottom in the south, who are arguably the oldest Jewish community. They believe that they arrived with the first temple with King Solomon. After the temple was destroyed, they fled persecution and came to live in Cochin. The second group we're going to look at are the Bnei Israel Jews of Mumbai, and you'll see here in Ahmedabad. And the last and most recent Jewish community we're going to look at are the Baghdadi Jews, who initially started in Calcutta but ended up thriving and basically dominating the culture in Mumbai and Greater India. So here's Cochin. We're going to start with Cochin. It was, you can look it down here. It's the southwestern coast of India. And it is now one of India's largest seaports. It's home to the international, the Pepper Exchange, Indian Spice Board. And if you've noticed what I mentioned before, the Jews have always lived near these bodies of water, which influence, of course, their cuisine. So here's the Cochin Jews. So they're also known as the Black Jews, as the Malabar Jews. And they at a very early period, they were granted by the Hindu king, the Maharaja, a special grant permitting them to live in perpetuity forever in Cochin. And these plates are actually inscribed with the date 379 Common Era. And now it's disputed. Some people say they believe it's closer to 1069, but Common Era. But these plates do claim a very long period of existence under the king's blessing, and a Jewish tribe being granted in perpetuity forever this right to live and worship as they want, unharassed. And in Modi in 2017 brought these copper plate replicas of these copper plates as a present to the state of Israel to represent India's long Jewish history. So this is actually, I took this, and that's not my picture. This is from the Hindu Times. I found it and thought you might be interested. So two rabbis from Vilna actually visited India and were fascinated by the Jews of India, but especially by the temples, idols, and their relationship with the Jews. So these two, one of the travelers, his name was David de Bet Hillel, and he entered like in the mid 1850s, or actually he came in the 1830s, and he entered temples and he discussed philosophy and beliefs with the priests, and he disparaged Hinduism, but he visited many temples, over 6, and wrote in great length about his thoughts and experiences there. And his conclusion was that all Hindu worship is biblical forms of idolatry, and that actually he believed it was Jews that brought this idolatry from the Middle East, from the Levant to India. And another traveler, Jacob Sapir, wrote a travelogue called Evan Sapir in the 1860s, and his interpretation was actually fascinating. He viewed his travels and his visits to the temples as a way of understanding insights into obscure passages in Jewish texts. So he said, if I want to understand how chariots work, we have chariot festivals. If I want to understand the description of worshiping idolatry, there's no better chance. So he saw this actually as a useful means. And his solution, actually, he also believed that the Hindu priests were corrupt. And he believed that the solution for India, for the non-Jews of India, was to convert to Christianity and read up on European literature. And he kind of agrees with the British liberal and also missionary attitudes of that time period. But he's much more interesting for me in terms of his observations on the Jews of Cochin. So the Jews arrived in Cochin, as I said, with King Solomon's temple. But another wave of Jews arrived. These are the Black Jews, the original Jews. Another wave of Jews came in the 1400s, after 1492, from Sfarad, from Spain and Portugal, after the Alhambra decree, when the Sephardic Jews eventually made their way to Cochin as a place of refuge. And they became known as the Paradesi Jews, meaning in Mali, meaning the foreign Jews. And these Sephardic Jews maintained their connections with Europe because of they spoke Spanish, they spoke several languages fluently, and they eventually, of course, learned the dialect. I said I meant Tamil before. They learned to speak a Judeo-Tamil, the local dialect, and so they became also thoroughly acculturated, and they became known as the White Jews because presumably they were a bit lighter skinned than the Cochin original Jews. And these two communities maintained their ethnic and cultural distinctions, and they were still fully Jewish. The Sephardic Jews also brought with them this mishuchrarim, basically freed slaves that were also Jewish. It's assumed they converted, and they were treated as third-tier Jews. They were fully accepted as Jews. They were allowed to come to synagogue. They had to usually sit on the floor or outside in the courtyard, but they were allowed to worship. And they were considered Jews, but they didn't intermarry with the other ones. They were unto themselves. And Rabbi Jacob Sapir is very offended by this. And he describes being invited to the Brit Milah, the bris of a mishuchar, of a previously free Jewish slave, or the descendant of one. and he's honored to hold a baby. And he describes how the people, these mishucharim, these descendants of the freed slaves, are so appreciative of his generosity. And he writes in his journal, I did nothing but accept a fellow Jew, and I'm ashamed that they were so delighted by it. I'm ashamed of the prejudice they had to experience to feel like this. By the way, his journals have unfortunately not been fully translated from the Hebrew. I think someone has to actually undergo a full translation. His journals are fascinating. And here I show you the Paradesi synagogue, which is adjacent to the king's palace. And you can see here, I added this picture where there was a synagogue that was previously built there in 1344. And there's actually a mention of an older synagogue built I believe even in the 4th century in another part of Cochin. So you can see they have a very long established presence. And here I want to show you the clock tower of the Paradesi synagogue. And to give you an example, this Paradesi synagogue originally was just for the Sephardim. But eventually they allowed the Cochin Jews, the Black Jews, to also worship there, but they couldn't become full members. They worship, but they couldn't, and they were allowed to enter, sit with them, but they couldn't become full members. The Mishucharim, these group of freed slaves, had no rights, and they had no synagogue of their own, so they would sit on the floor or the steps outside. In the 20th century, there's a fellow by the name of Abraham Salim, a freed slave descendant, who actually, he's called the Jewish Gandhi. He actually protested this kind of discrimination and won a lot of rights for his people. And essentially, this type of discrimination has largely ended. Unfortunately, it's ended as the majority of Jews of India have left and gone to either Israel or America or Australia. But still, this was the reality. So here's just a couple of photos of the Black Jews of Cochin. And I just wanted to go through this. When you wander the streets of Cochin, you will see things like Jew Street, Jew Cemetery. And this is not pejoratively meant. This was just the way they wrote it out in English, the Jews themselves. A brief look. This is the synagogue itself, the Paradesi synagogue, how it looks today. And the diet. Oh, this is my favorite part. The food in India, as many of you can imagine, is flavorful and, to my mind, delightful. And when you eat the food of the Jewish people of India, it totally reflects the diets of the local tribes around them, of the local Indians, except that it's kosher. They follow the laws of separating meat and dairy, and but the cooking is spicy with like ginger, especially in Cochin, coriander, mustard seed, I remember, fresh and dried chili peppers, of curry leaves, cardamom, and because there's meat can spoil under this high heat and humidity, you will often get yogurt as substitute and all kinds of vegetables. So vegetarian diet is encouraged most of the time. It just happens. But on Shabbat, of course, you get a meal like this. It's a traditional Cochin Jewish Shabbat. You have these pastries here are spiced chicken, fried pastries filled with spiced chicken. To your right is this dish called ispeti. It's delicious. It's this spicy beef stew that's kind of a chamin, a cholent, that's meant to be hot, served hot on Shabbat day. And above that, this cake-looking thing is called apam, and it's a Shabbat bread. And again, once again, look at these colors and remember, they're not accidental. Every color is chosen and they know what it means. And of course, fish is always a proper dish. And it's one of the ways in which rabbis would test the Jewishness of the Indian tribes, of the Indian, so-called Indian Jews. They would ask them to catch and prepare fish, and they'd write down note which fish they were discarding. And they noticed very quickly that they're discarding fish without scales. And they look for gills, and they realized this was yet another proof of they've kept their Jewishness throughout these centuries. Here's just, I took this during my, let's see if I can play this. This is just a brief look at the fish market. And some of my students. And this is the shul, the part of the shul. I'm not gonna show you this is the opening of the Torah. So the worship still continues. Here we are in Jewtown. And we were now going to, so that's the Cochin Jews. I hope you're thinking about it. I'm looking forward to your questions. I'm sure you have a lot already bubbling in your minds. And now let's look at another fascinating Jewish people that settled in the area of Mumbai. And if you look here, where the circle is, the Bnei Israel, they believe that they are descended from 7 Jewish families that were shipwrecked over 2,000 years ago when they were fleeing the Seleucids, the Antiochus's persecution of the Jews in Judea. They fled and made it all the way to India, and there was a shipwreck. And the Jews that survived ended up moving close by to Ahmadinabad. I always have a hard time with that name. And they became known as the Shanivartelis, the Saturday oil pressers, because much of the bemusement of the other Indians around them, they did not work on Shabbat, on Saturday. So they became specialists in creating oil, palm oil specifically, but they would always rest and not work on Saturday. And they had these other peculiar rituals that kind of marked them as different. And of course, eventually they are proven to be Jews by the fact that they kept Shabbat as their dietary laws, and the fact that they had circumcision. I'm trying to think, and there was another one, then kashrut. So so these are them. This is what they, all through their history, starting with their shipwreck, they maintain certain Jewish phrases as well, Hebrew phrases. And I think it was unanimously decided that these were a Jewish people, although they had forgotten many. They didn't have their Talmud, they didn't have the Torah. They'd forgotten much of what they were supposed to know, but they kept enough, and they refused to intermarry, that the chief rabbis of most Jewish based dins around the world acknowledged them fully as Jews, and there was never a question after this. So this is the site of the shipwreck by the coast of Alibag, just south of Mumbai. And over here, this is a sacred site known as Prophet Elijah's chariot site. And they believe that the imprints were left by the chariot wheels and the hooves of Elijah's horses. And they say that when they were shipwrecked, the Bnei Israel people, and unconscious, they believe that Eliyahu Hanavi revived them and taught them how to actually eat from the local foods, which is coconuts. And they still come and break coconuts on these rocks to symbolize their new life and new means of nourishment in India. They also have a unique, here I am with one of my students. This is actually the family of the coconut. It's not a coconut itself, but it's edible, right in the same area of the shipwreck. And it shows you again this malid. There's a ceremony called the malida, which basically consists of 5 different fruits and these special dishes that you commemorate all kinds of Jewish holidays with them, including Tu B'Shvat, which we recently celebrated. I'm just gonna go back here. So here's an example of a malida. It's called the Seder of Elijah the prophet, and they have certain prayers. They keep chanting again, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, who is always there for us, always saved us, always close to us. And these ceremonies, these Malida ceremonies, I was just promised by my friend Yael that she'll do one for us when we come, is a way of giving thanks for any auspicious ceremony, a wedding, bar mitzvah, engagement, birthdays, even housewarming. So here's a Jewish graveyard. Again, why is this unique? First of all, you see the Hindu and the Hebrew, the Marathi, sorry, not Hindi, but also the Hindu, of course, the other religions in India usually cremate. So the fact that you have a graveyard already is unusual. And this graveyard has again been kept by this area of the shipwreck for many hundreds of years. This is the Levi Asher. He was a friend of mine. He was very sad by his father's grave. He told me that he was going to be the last of his community to be buried here. All the rest of his family went to Israel, and he actually cried when he told me this. Here is a typical Jewish like a Bet Knesset, and one moment. And this is the outside of it. This is the typical local way of one moment here. I'm losing my view here. It's called the Magen Avot cemetery, and it's you see the pinkness, the colors, and close friends of mine actually pray here, daven here, and Here's some Jewish children outside. This is the gate outside the synagogue. And this is a close friend of mine, Yael, and her family, the whole Girard family live in India. One of them actually just moved to Israel. The youngest of them did the army. We've kind of adopted them into our family. But I want you to hear from their own voice how they perceive their community. One moment. Let me see if I can, here, I want to make it bigger like this. Here we go. I'll play a few minutes and see if I can get it a bit bigger.
I can see it, but I don't hear the sound from it.
When Israel community
There we go. Yeah, I do hear it.
From the rest of the world Jewry, with the fact that once they arrived in India with this very difficult kind.
I lost it again. Never mind. If I can't make this work, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna quit. Well, because I have too much to say and I don't want to waste time on this. I mean, it's not a waste of time. Perhaps, Jeff, what I can do is I can share this with you afterwards, and you can send it to everybody. Is that?
I think that's good. Yep, we'll send out the link.
So these are friends of mine. This is the Girard family, and one of the speakers is Yael. She is the mother of these two beautiful boys, Avniel and Nathaniel, and they are members of the Bnei Israel community. And they explain all kinds of things in this video about arranged marriages, how it's one of the ways of saving the Jewish community from assimilation. They talk about the uniqueness of what it means to be an Indian Jew, and yet the aspects of what it means still to be both Indian as one part of their identity, and fully Jewish as the other. And it's very compelling to hear them speak. That's why I want you to hear it in their voices. But here Yael is showing us the oil that her family made, and explains again this term of the Saturday oil people. And this is inside the synagogue. You notice her feet are bare. So when we go to daven to pray in these synagogues in India, we have to take off our shoes. The chazan takes his shoes off as a sign of respect. And if you know your Bible, Moses has to also take his shoes off at the burning bush. So it's in a sense that really taking your shoes and socks off while you're praying. You do this in Islam as well. It's an aspect of praying in India that I found fascinating. Again, I love the dishes that we have. You have this clear. I just want to go back to I can't see this here. You have this lamb biryani. That was the dish. It's a typical Pesach dish, Passover dish for Bnei Israel, and it's served with rice because, like Sephardim and unlike Ashkenazim, rice is considered to be kosher for Pesach for this community. And so in 1947, at the height of this community's existence in Mumbai, there was about 24,000 Jews here. Now it's very small. I would say under 1,000. And it keeps declining as they immigrate to Israel and Australia and England. And their food, we keep on back to their food. Their food is characterized by, just like in Cochin, of the people around them. In this case, it's the Maharashtra people. So you have a lot of coconut milk. We spoke about coconuts. You have hot chili, cardamom, cinnamon, turmeric, ginger, cumin, coriander, garam, what's it called? Garam masala. Yeah. And these are uniquely Jewish and uniquely India. And then finally, we're coming to the Baghdadi Jews of Calcutta. So Baghdadi Jews, you can think of it as Mesopotamia, they've been engaged in trade since the onset, the beginning of Islam, basically, since the Abbasid Caliphate from the 8th to the 10th centuries. And they would travel by ship and overland to India for trading purposes. And some Jews of Baghdad would start to settle. And eventually, hundreds and eventually thousands came to settle in Mumbai. And at first, they were fully Baghdadi in the sense of their customs. They were all, if you know the Baghdadi Jewish customs. But eventually, they became more and more Indian. They learned to speak the local dialect. And this transition, this gradual transition from the 1600s from Baghdadi Jews to becoming fully Indian, that now when you use the word Baghdadi Jew to anybody in the world, they will automatically think of India. The most famous of the Baghdadi Jewish families is known as the Sassoon family. They're known as the Rothschilds of India. Of course, they also benefited, I guess, like the Broncos, maybe. I was thinking prohibition. They benefited from the opium trade with China, and later selling Indian cotton, and they became very, very powerful. And since we're about to celebrate the Purim very soon, here is a Megillah produced for the Baghdadi Jewish community in the 19th century in Mumbai. And the language, of course, is Marathi. I mean, that you see there. And why I wish I could read you the first sentence. I can come up. In the days of Achashverosh, who Achashverosh, the same Achashverosh, Hamelech, the king, Mahodu, from India, Ad Kush until Ethiopia. Sheva be'esrim u'mea medinot, 127 countries. So it's a so again, you even in the Megillah, you have this reference to India. I just wanted to, that's why I want to include that particular passage. So the Baghdadi Jews keep growing in influence. So you have this David Sassoon library in Mumbai that was consecrated, that was I guess opened in the 1867, and he also actually here's David Sassoon in the library. Look how he looks like your typical grave Jewish scholar, yet he's festooned with this colorful wreath of Indian flowers. As I told you again, remember the bright orange, think of the colors. And here is the Sassoon Library in 1860. And he also opened up something known as the Mumbai Sassoon Docks. So it's the most incredible, fascinating, colorful, and very smelly place to get fish, the fish market. If we go, I'm going to insist that we visit this market, or when we go, I should say. And the Sassoon family became known as the face of India. He also built and dedicated the famous gateway to India that you've heard of. You've probably seen pictures of everywhere that faces you when you come from the Indian Ocean right into Mumbai. So they established this economic empire with centers in Mumbai, Calcutta, Rangoon, Hong Kong, Shanghai. My family actually was associated with them as well. My family's from Shanghai, Singapore, and other places. And they and their influence is still felt there. If you go to daven in the shoals now in Mumbai, you kind of get the smattering of all the different types of Jews I described. You'll get the Bnei Israel, you'll get some Cochin Jews, and you'll get Baghdadi Jews all in one synagogue now praying together, because they've become so much less in terms of as a population. So one last thing about the diet, we have the fish. Jews don't mix, as we know, milk with meat. They use yogurt for everything. And many Jews actually, aside from Shabbat, are primarily vegetarian. And you can see how this Jewish presence also transforms Mumbai's own self-image as well from the Sassoon family. This is actually the gateway to India, also Sassoon. And here is the Bet Knesset Eliyahu, the main synagogue of Mumbai, built by the Sassoons in 1884. And you have look at it's kept in beautiful condition. When you go there, you'll be fully welcomed. You can daven there, you can pray there. They'll be very curious about you, and you'll also feel fully welcomed. You'll be invited to Shabbat dinners for families there. So it's a very warm and welcoming community. And and this is one of my favorite synagogues actually to visit. So this is the Baghdadi Jews. I had more points I want to make them. They maintained their sense of community, and they kept some of their Iraqi Jewish traditions for like amulets for protecting the newborn babies, the circumcision services, marriage and funeral customs. They followed the ways of Baghdad, but they also mixed in terms of diet, in terms of language, as I said, in terms of acknowledging the fellow Jews as fellow Jews. In modern times, I want to tell you kind of these types of the Bnei Israel, the Cochin Jews, and the Baghdadi Jews, in an odd way, they are facing some competition from Chabad that has moved in. Chabad has come in, and they're trying to help the Jews of India maintain their Jewishness, make sure that that there's a strong Jewish presence maintained there, and yet the traditions they are bringing in are considered to be different, considered to be problematic, and considered to be in many ways as competition and taking over. They have their own shuls, their own Chabad shuls, and that's a subject for a different day. But I wanted to touch on a story. This Girard family that I showed you, they have a young boy named Avniel, and he was present, I think it was at 2008, when the Mumbai terrorist attack happened in the shul, in the Chabad shul. He was the babysitter for the baby. And just on that one day, he happened to stay home, and the family was massacred by these Islamo terrorists. And the baby was saved by the nurse Sandra, and they were both brought to Israel to live in Afula, and she took care of him and is taking care of him until today. But when he moved to Israel, he stayed with us in Jerusalem, and one day he decided he wanted to take me for ice cream, and he started talking to me about the story, about how hard it was for him, how his mother said he didn't smile for a year afterwards. And as we're walking and talking, I said, Avniel, instead of ice cream, let's go into the central bus station and have a shawarma. So he says, okay. We walk inside, and as we're sitting down, he looks up and he goes, Sandra? And it was the nurse who saved the baby, who Avniel had a special relationship as well, that just happened to be visiting Jerusalem on that day, happened to get off the bus, and they basically hugged each other. And they're not an emotional people, but started crying. It was really a very beautiful moment. I just wanted to share that story with you as well, to show you that this connection with Israel, Judaism, unfortunately, terrorism is still very much a reality for us as well. So I don't know. I want to share the story with you before I continue a little bit. So again, let's go back to the here's some of the Baghdadi foods to illustrate that they're not so Baghdadi. You have chicken shirtani on the top. You have aloo makala, these deep fried potatoes. But the Baghdadi Jews also brought their preference for khamin, for their type of cholent. And what they discovered in India, these new spices and everything, I can't help. I love the spices, the turmeric, the coriander, chili, fenugreek seeds, khilbe, cardamom, mustard seed, fresh ginger, and it's just what the diets that they've created. Even the Bnei Israel Jews and the Cochin Jews love their foods as well. It just shows you that Jewish fusion is not a new thing. This is an okra dish that they prepared for me with an okra dish that I ate from my wife's grandmother. It's traditionally, I thought traditionally Middle Eastern, but they make it with hot Indian spices. So here again is my friend Yael on the bima. Look at her in the bare feet. And here's a siddur. On the other side of the siddur, you'll always have marhati. And just to show you what we're in India, we're going to see this in plenty of places. This is again in the shul, in the Mumbai synagogue. And this is with my friend Yael, just walking. By the way, all the women carry umbrellas. And what I found very quaint is she explained to me that she has to maintain her color. She can't get too dark. And she insists that her sons wear parasols as well, and they resist. What I was curious about doing, because I have a bit of time left, because I didn't show you the videos. And let me see, I'll take 5 minutes of your time before I go into questions to show you some of the aspects of India that is not Jewish. So this is the Ganges River, and we're also going to spend time here as well, in Varanasi. So all religious festivals for Hindus, the most important ones take place on the banks of the Ganges River. And every few kilometers or so, you get an area with temples and steps, and each area is called a ghat, where the river stops and you see this. And Varanasi has about 84 ghats, and these ghats are used for the purpose of bathing in the holy river. You have to like in a mikvah, you have to immerse yourself, and for ablutions, and as well as cremation sites. So while we go down the Ganges River, this was very difficult for me at first, by the way, is this commemoration of the dead, the idea that this acceptance of death almost. And this is a cremation that I was watching, that I took pictures of as we're going by on the boat. This can be quite difficult for people to handle, but it's fascinating to watch. The cremation of the bodies, the idea that you have true salvation if you bring a body all the way to the Ganges and allow the ashes to be immersed in his waters. And so what usually happens if we go as visitors is the obvious conclusion is people come here to die. But Hindus believe that if they die in Varanasi and they're cremated, they'll obtain something known as moksha. And moksha means they're released from the cycle of reincarnation, and they join God as a spirit, like as the greater spirit. And they believe this salvation is the actual hope. You want to do good deeds in life to be released from this wheel of reincarnation. And this term is also used, by the way, in Jainism and Buddhism and Sikhism and other types of Indian religions. I'm selling you on India because I think it's incredibly beautiful and important, but it can be challenging. I was overwhelmed when I did this boat trip on the Ganges the first time, and yet the more I came, the more I got to appreciate this attitudes, this acceptance of life and death as a whole different understanding and a perception that eluded me. It still eludes me, but I at least I understand and I can appreciate the conversation. It's taken me to a different place, a different way of thinking. So here's some just women just doing their ablutions, and so if for Hindus this idea of moksha, this aim of freeing yourself from the divine wheel, you get there by living a dharma, a virtuous and moral life. And the other thing you want to look for is this idea of living an artha life, which means having a good income for your family, security, along with sensual pleasures and enjoyment. And all these concepts together are known as pursutua in Hinduism. And so, and again, as I said, if Buddhism was created in India and Hinduism, these concepts are interchangeable. So this idea of moksha exists also in Buddhism, but they call it nirvana. But the terms are actually interchangeable. And this is just a symbol when we put the when you travel to India, they'll give you these lamps, and you will it's called the Diwali festival, and you'll put the lamps on the water along with your wishes, and it's kind of beautiful to watch these lights just floating away in the water. Again, look at the colors of the outfits. And then of course you have these fellows known as the sadhus. The sadhus are the holy men of India, and they're worshipped by Hindus as these representatives of the gods. They're known as the naked saints, and they practice asceticism and solitary meditation, and they live this kind of simple lifestyle with these few possessions. But if you go to them, they'll bless you. They're also very willing to converse with you and talk with you, and they generally they'll walk and travel over great distances. They do pilgrimages, they visit temples, and celibacy is common, but they also can engage in consensual tantric sex if they feel that that's part of an important experience. It's a totally different type of monk and the sadhu lifestyle, and it's something that I really would urge you to investigate further. I guess since we've arrived at this point, I might as well talk to you a little bit about Buddhism. So Buddhism begins in India, in this stupa near Varanasi, where Buddha gives his first sermon to his followers when he finally gains enlightenment. And it starts in India, and interestingly enough, more recently, the Dalai Lama's form of Buddhism in Tibet found sanctuary in India, and after he was forced to flee the Chinese occupation of Tibet and make his way to India and to Dharamsala, he rebuilt his palace there. So in many ways, this ultimate form of reincarnated Buddhism under the Dalai Lama is living a preserved and healthy life in Dharamsala at this very moment. This is just I wanted to show you some slides of Dalai Lama fleeing Tibet, and And again, at the very beginning, I asked you about this attraction that Jews have to Buddhism and to India. And many people seek out these Buddhists of India to understand themselves and their spirituality. You might know about the book, I have it up at The Jew and the Lotus, the Jubus. And it's an attraction that continues. And we actually, with my students, we frequently visit we've been lucky that we go to Dharamsala. We've been lucky enough to meet the Dalai Lama several times. This is me with him. He was holding my hand and he made a joke about one of my girls having a Jewish nose. That's why everyone's laughing. But they are fascinated by the Jews, the Tibetan Buddhists. They are in deep admiration. The Dalai Lama said this to us personally, that after thousands of years in exile, we found our way back to our homeland. And this is one of the reasons why they are so fascinated with the Jews. In their minds, we kept our culture and we lived in exile for thousands of years and made our way back as a whole people into our homeland. This is what the Dalai Lama told our group. And he says they are emulating this system of creating a culture in Dharamsala. He said this was not the way of Tibetans before, but he realized they had to create a new way for Tibet to survive. So this is just a woman in Dharamsala. I found again. Here's a good friend of mine. He's a Tibetan monk. His name is Damsho, Tenzin Damsho. He is what's called a geshe, the highest level you can attain. And he accompanies us. If we go, we will definitely meet him. And he was fascinated by the sadhu monk, and he started carrying on a long conversation with him. He came with us all the way to Varanasi. And for me, this perfectly illustrates this intersection of cultures and religions and respect. He's very wise. He advised many people, many of my students. He teaches at Oxford as well. He's also very playful. And let me see, shall I leave you with this, with the last one, with Sikh? I made a pun here, Seek and you shall find. So Sikhism is this kind of attempt to synthesize monotheism and polytheism. So it's one of the most recently founded major religions. It has about 25 to 30 million adherents known as Sikhs all around the world. And their golden palace is Namaste. Again, another place that we will try and visit. You see, Elle came with me there as well. And this golden temple is a holy site for Sikhs, but it's welcome to anybody of any faith. And Sikhs don't believe in pilgrimages at all. This is just a Sikh with a friend of mine. And there's something else I'd like to show you if I have a chance. Can I take you? Yeah. Let's just look at the Taj Mahal very briefly. So we didn't talk very much about the Muslims in India. So at the very beginning, they used to the very first invasions in the 800s, when the Arab conquest started from Arabia. They conquered certain elements outside of India, certain fringe areas, but the only true conquering that really happened was the Mughals from Central Asia, and they came in and they ruled India and Pakistan in the 16th and 17th centuries. And this Mughal empire is the first to really consolidate Islam in South Asia. It spread Muslim culture as well as the faith and their arts. And the Taj Mahal kind of, if we talked about the Jewish cookery and spices and dishes and clothing, we have the Taj Mahal. It kind of epitomizes their love of the craftsmanship of what both is Indian and what they perceive as Islamic and also Asian. They incorporated them all. And so the Taj Mahal for us, and we're going to visit it, is going to be a way of understanding this kind of fusion of cultures in India from the Islamic perspective. So it's not a mosque, it's not a religious monument, but it is going to be examined in the sense of Islam's presence in India, its current relationship after the separation of Pakistan from India, and the tensions that are at the moment are very fraught between the Hindu nationalists and the Islamists and the Muslims of India. So I hope I've taken you on a journey. You might not see eye to eye with all of these ways of thinking, but I will now be happy to end the discussion at this point and take some questions. I'll stop the sharing here.
All right. Dr. Mendelsohn, thank you so much. I know what I'm having for dinner tonight.
It made you hungry, didn't it?
Yes, it did. So thank you.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
run and get my battery because I didn't realize I'm running low, and I brought my computer to see me.
All right, so go and do that, and I will take this opportunity to do a couple things. Number one is to remind people that we're going to do a Q&A, so please post your questions into the Q&A, and we'll get to as many of those as possible. My gosh, I hope you're aware by now, Dr. Mendelsohn will be traveling to India in November. All the information about this trip is on our website, yalet.com. There's a little tile right on our homepage. You can find out more information by clicking it. And if you don't know, we have an upcoming virtual series this April. So there's actually 5 Tuesdays in April. This is going to be a 5-part program with Professor Stephen Burke. The Holocaust Revisited. It's if you've participated in any of the virtual programs with Professor Burke, you know the level of scholarship is very high. This is very much his area of expertise, and believe it or not, we've been doing these programs for 5 years. These virtual programs, we have not done a program specifically on the Holocaust, so that is coming up in April. 20% of the program proceeds are going to be donated to Yad Vashem, and there is an early bird going on right now, so I encourage you to sign up and join us in April. Of course, it's the month of Yom HaShoah, and there is a tremendous amount to still learn and engage with when talking about the Holocaust. So I will leave that. Oh, actually, one more thing. I just want to make sure people know more coming up very soon. Dr. Mendelsohn's actually going to be leading a group to Greece this coming May. So if you're interested in traveling soon, come join Dr. Mendelsohn in Greece. Okay. Let's stop all of that. We'll start to get to questions. David, did you have a chance to plug in your laptop?
I'm plugged in. I can ready for questions.
Beautiful. Okay, you want questions? We've got questions. Okay.
Okay.
So number one, let's we were already talking about food. Let's start with a food question. I assume I know the answer, but Carla Bender would like to know, do Indian Jews also not eat shellfish and calamari?
Absolutely. They're absolutely kosher. That's one of the ways they actually prove their Jewishness. They tested them both in Cochin and the Bnei Israel Jewish communities. They didn't say, they just followed them to they say, we want to watch you fishing. And they watched them discarding the shellfish. They watched them discarding the shrimp. And they watched them throwing away eels, fish that didn't have scales. And they realized that this is a definite sign. Who would throw a perfectly good food, when all of their fellow Indians were eating it? That was one of the final proofs they needed to actually say these are Jewish people.
So many good questions in here. Okay. Eileen Milan writes in, thank you for this informative lecture. I had no idea Jews were even Indian in India. Would love to get the recording to watch again, show my friends. Yes, just so people know, this is recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel, the Ayelet Tours YouTube channel, probably by this weekend. So yes, you are welcome to share this with others. Tamar Jaffe would like to know, did Gandhi or the British in India have a relationship with the Jewish communities of India?
Very much so, yeah. They did. I mean, not very much so. I shouldn't be that emphatic. They had a relationship with the Jews in general. Like Gandhi was interested in the problem, the difficulties the Jews had. He actually recommended that during the Holocaust, the Jews throw themselves, do the passive resistance, and he wrote a letter to Hitler, actually, which is in that Gandhi Museum. He expressed a lot of admiration for the Jews, a lot of appreciation, and he also was kind of against Zionism, the whole idea of Zionism. So he had it wasn't, I wouldn't say a difficult relationship, but he never openly came out and stood out against it or something like that. He had his criticisms and he had his appreciation, I would say.
What was his opposition to Zionism specifically?
He says like, I'm trying to, I mean, I have to pull up Gandhi's treatise actually, but he says to the extent like, in many ways what the Palestinians say, he's like, why did they go to a place that is not their home and make it their home and take it away from another people? Why can't they live where they are and find a way to solve their problems instead of creating a whole new type of problems? And I believe one of the essays I read said that he was afraid of Pakistan doing something similar, like of this idea of separating to become a new people alarmed him because he saw the danger of it happening in India as well. So he had a personal reason for being against it.
So just not to go too far down that track, but just in terms of Gandhi, in your recent visits to India, is he still held in the same level of high regard that we on the outside probably think that he is, or has kind of the man on the street opinion of Gandhi shifted at all over the years?
Not really. No, he's still held in very high esteem. There's the usual what do we call it when we take apart our heroes, like the as we examine his issues with the abuse of children, how he treated his wife. Like there's a lot of stories that are coming to light that show the less pleasant aspects of his character, and show that he was that he was also problematic. Of course, the Muslim Indians have a very different relationship and very highly critical of Gandhi. But in general, he's still considered to be the hero, the one who freed them, the one who freed them of the caste system. If without Gandhi, you'd still have the caste system, I believe, and he's appreciated as such.
All right, a couple questions about anti-Semitism. We'll combine them both. Ellie Brown writes in, if there was no anti-Semitism there, or almost none, why have almost all the Jews left for other homelands? And Leanne Sims writes in, I'm curious that despite the lack of anti-Semitism in India, why has there been such a large exodus of Jews to the West?
Right. First of all, the opportunity. Like the moment you have opportunity, you want it for your children as well. So Israel, of course, creates incredible opportunity economically, so many job opportunities, a better future for your children. India's huge, and it's very difficult to make it there. So it's just for that reason alone. It's just easier. The communities don't want to die out. Like they're very they're when you go there, there's a lot of pride, there's a lot of love. The Indians who go away have very warm memories of India. They don't have they don't say they're persecuted but they will not, they have no intention of ever going back, the ones I speak to here. Like my friend Avniel just came here. He traveled with us to different countries, and then suddenly he realized he couldn't get into certain countries because of his Indian passport. He was turned down, I forget where, two countries. And so he made Aliyah just so he could have a passport that allowed him to go to many more countries that he couldn't go to before.
And now there's different countries he can't go into.
Exactly. Yeah. He made the same joke, but
Yeah.
But the Jewish communities, the whole world are facing the same problem. Everywhere I go, Morocco, they say the Jews had it so good under the kings of Morocco. Why did they leave? Everywhere you go, there's this question, and I would say the easy answer is opportunity. There's when you have great opportunity, you'll go.
An anonymous question came in, back to the food. One of the Shabbat meal pictures that you were showing had beef in it. Isn't that taboo in India?
No, it's taboo among the Hindus. The Muslims eat beef, and so do the Jews. And Muslims and Jews live close to each other, so they can shech their animals, slaughter them according to their rituals in peace without offending the Hindus around them. They're aware of the sensitivity, but there's no like pogroms or persecution because they do it. So they eat their chicken, they eat their beef, they eat their food, and they do it kind of in their own solitary way. But it's not I wouldn't say it's not incredibly frowned upon. There are some Hindu nationalists who are making it a thing with the Muslims specifically because they're anti-Islamic at the moment, but it has never been a problem.
Okay. Interesting question about the trip itself that's coming up. Specifically, how do we balance, or what's the percentage of sites of Jewish interest versus general interest when traveling in India?
One of the reasons why I framed the lecture the way I did is I wanted people to understand, why would we go to Dharamsala? Why would I want to go visit Tibetan monks? Why would we go to Varanasi River? It's precisely that. So to understand the acculturation that Jews of India went through, and the acculturation we go through in different places without realizing it, to understand things at the roots and have these conversations, and then visit the Jewish places and have conversations with Indian Jews there. So it's really meant to be a thorough, immersive experience in every single sense. And I don't believe you can do it properly just by visiting Jewish communities.
All right, we've got a question about the Black Jews, which you spoke about, I think, dating back to the time of King Solomon, correct?
That's right.
So my question is kind of related to this. Have there been genealogical studies that kind of tied them, in terms of DNA to Jewish roots?
Yeah, specifically the Kohanic gene is very prevalent among them. You heard about the Cohen chromosome?
Yeah.
So yeah, that and my of course my Indian friends took great pleasure in sending me all their studies. Every time they come out, there's a new one. So yeah, there have been studies, and I believe many of them corroborate both that there is a Jewish, definitely a very strong Jewish presence, and also there was definitely some kind of intermarriage or intercultural mixing that went on that made them become darker and look so Indian, but they still
Yeah,
remain
they
Jewish.
do, right. In
Yeah.
those pictures, like it's very clearly Indian. Yeah. So, okay. One more question we'll start to wrap up here. Dennis Friedman would like to know, is there a Judeo-Indian slash Tamil language of their own, like Yiddish?
There is. It's not quite to the same extent, but it does exist. And I have the same fascination. I'm actually what's called a sociolinguist, so I'm interested in language and culture and how they interrelate. So this particular dialect fascinates me, and it was all I could do not to do 5 or 6 slides on it. I actually took and deleted them before. So it's a very yes, it exists, and it's another good question, a follow-up question. Why do we create these languages everywhere we go? It's always the local language mixed with a bit of Hebrew, and that nobody else can understand. So it's kind of like Ladino, Yiddish, Judeo-Arabic, and this Indian Judeo-Indian dialects as well. So yeah, it definitely happens.
Yeah. How's your Tamil?
I want to improve it, but non-existent. My Marathi is okay. My Hindi is not
Yeah.
bad, but
I'm
I mean,
sure it's better than
it's not
mine.
bad.
Yeah.
It's very broken, but yeah.
Amazing. So one of the as we go down a path, Lizette Sarfati just wrote in, do the Sephardic Jews still speak Ladino?
Yeah, I mean, of India or in general?
I think in general, just in
Generally, yeah.
Ladino cultures,
My wife's family speaks Ladino,
yeah.
and they speak it to each other. I asked my wife's grandmother who's from Turkey, to please speak only Ladino to my children, my 3 children, and she says no, I want them to learn Hebrew. Like that's the attitude in Israel is we don't speak any other language but Hebrew, so the children learn Hebrew. So but it's studied in university. I don't believe it's not as strong as Yiddish in terms of it is in danger. It is a language in danger, but it's still surviving.
All right, Dr. Mendelsohn, as always, so appreciative for your time, expertise, and presentation, and for staying up until the middle of the night to do so. One of these days we'll figure out a time machine to make it all smooths out.
It's really a pleasure. I love sharing this. Doing India is actually. I don't know if you can tell. I get very excited. It's something so unique and such an incredible. Most people like one of the commenters said, you just don't know about it. You never heard about it before, and suddenly you look it up, and I guarantee you, they're members of your Jewish communities that you probably have 1 or 2 that have Indian Jewish background. You'd be very surprised once you start asking and investigating.
Well, everybody's got the opportunity to go and explore more with you this coming November, so I hope people will consider that.
I hope so.
And until then, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and in enriching the conversation with your questions. We'll hopefully see you as we continue to learn together next month with Professor Burke on the Holocaust Revisited starting April 1st. And I will wish you all a good night. Shalom.
Shalom, everybody. Bye for now.